So welcome. This week we have Claire Gibson come to the Lovefly podcast. Welcome, Claire.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul.
No, I'm really looking forward to hearing because we've touched a little bit on the thing that you're trained in, but not as much as I would like. And so to have somebody who actually knows it, works it, etc., is very exciting for us. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm really pleasure to be here.
So tell us kind of who you are, what you do, that sort of stuff, so the listeners can get a sense of what they're getting.
Yeah. So I'm a psychological therapist and I'm trained in a number of different therapies. Cognitive behavioral therapy. So I think you've probably talked about that before, Paul, maybe. That's CBT.
Yeah.
But also compassion-focused therapy as well. So that's CFT. As you probably know, there are a lot of acronyms in psychology. I'm also trained in EMDR, eye movement desensitization, reprocessing.
Okay.
And
so Oh, sorry, go on, yeah, keep going.
No, I was just going to say, I'm currently working for a trauma service in London. So people who've been through a traumatic experience often are presenting with problems such as post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression. So doing a lot of individual work, but also group work as well.
Oh, well, nice. Okay, excellent. So you sound like the perfect human to have on the podcast. So we have had to talk about CBT before, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So I know that some of these things overlap in some ways, and there are strands that are separate as well. So whatever you feel is most appropriate to dip into, whether it's, the CFT is not something we've had anybody talk a lot about.
Yeah.
Had a little bit about EMDR in the past, so those two areas particularly interesting. I know that Susan, our clinical director, was also trained in EMDR and CBT as well. So, but I don't know how much we've actually spoken about it.
Okay.
Yeah, so feel free to say anything you like, really. So, tell us a little bit about each of the things and how they're similar and different. Perhaps that might be helpful for listeners.
Yeah, so I think probably the first place to start is thinking about what is a kind of therapy and an evidence-based therapy. And that's really where cognitive behavioral therapy comes into play. There's been lots of research to show that cognitive behavioral therapy is really effective for a number of different presentations and disorders, including anxiety and including phobias. And that's the therapy that kind of comes most recommended when somebody is presenting with a phobia, such as the fear of flying. Cognitive behavioral therapy is really looking at your thinking processes, which is the cognitive part of CBT, and what you're doing behaviorally. So as we know, with the fear of flying, a lot of avoidance might come in to play, or a lot of what we call safety behaviors, doing things to try and reduce the level of anxiety. And cognitive behavioral therapy really looks at kind of how all of those areas are maintaining the distress, maintaining the fear that someone's experiencing. And it looks at sort of strategies to try and change the way somebody might be thinking, change their behaviors in order to help them to feel better and to be able to face their fear. So it's quite like quite a practical theory. We often talk about homeworks in cognitive behavioral therapy. We like people to try and take what they're learning in the therapy room and test it out, do things in between sessions.
So just as a question then, if somebody used CBT as a way to help with their fear of flying, I know it's a little bit how long's a piece of string, but how many sessions would you say typically a person might need? Possible?
Off the top of my head, I think the recommendation for a phobia can be around 8 sessions. So there is a lot of work that you can do in a fairly short space of time. What you would also want to be kind of thinking about with the fear of flying is like what is the root of the fear of the flying as well. And that's where I think sort of my trauma work, I'd be thinking, has someone experienced a prior trauma, which is and then developed into a fear of flying? And you might find that you want to work on that traumatic experience first before then directly trying to work on the phobia. Or is the fear of flying, is that also linked in with experiences of panic disorder as well, so experiencing panic attacks? But cognitive behavioral therapy is a short-term therapy, so it doesn't have to. It's not sort of the same as maybe a sort of more psychoanalytic therapy where it might go on for years on end. This is seen to we set goals, we work towards them out of session work as well. So it doesn't have to be really, really kind of long term. A lot can be achieved in a short space of time.
Which I guess is quite appealing to people. I mean, I know there's lots of, I've seen people out there talking about the one-stop, come along and I'll cure you. I've always thought it takes a bit of time. I think that's eight sessions or around that. It's not too onerous, is it?
Yeah, and I think it's also about where someone is when they're coming to therapy. How ready are they for change? How motivated they might feel, and being prepared to sort of get in and start to do some of the work. And so sometimes it might be having to actually build up to that sort of work beforehand.
I think for me, there's a phrase I'm often heard, which drives me nuts, but they always go, oh, CBT didn't work for me, or I went to this, it didn't work. And I think, well, I don't quite understand that, because I think if you're motivated and you use the strategies and you do the homework and all the rest of it, I don't see why it wouldn't help, But.
Yeah. I would recommend anyone who was thinking about trying CBT to make sure that you're going to an accredited practitioner who's had the full CBT training. So in the UK, you'd be looking up on the BABCP website. So then that someone is kind of fully trained. There can be a lot of therapists who might be saying they have been trained in CBT, but it might only be a few days training. You want somebody who's done an accredited course, which would be kind of like at least a year long, and will have received a lot of supervision within that time as well.
That's a really good point there, because, there are weekend courses. I'm a coach, I'm a professional coach. Okay. I've seen weekend courses in coaching. Wow. And then they say, you can help clients. I think, well, I know coaching is a little bit more, it's less deep than perhaps CBT goes, but, in a weekend, no chance.
Yeah. It sort of intuitively doesn't feel right, does it? Yeah.
No, it's taken me flipping years to get to that point where I actually feel like I'm not too phased by most stuff. Yeah. Okay. So that's a really good point. So that's a little bit about the CBT and where they go. So that's the BABCP in the UK.
Yeah.
There is an American equivalent. We've got people all over the world that are listening, but you just need to Google. I think it's called the American. It's got a similar name, but it's got the word American in it. So if you're looking for that, I did have it before, but I can't remember now. So I'll probably just take this bit out because I'm stupid. Okay, so so move on to that's the CBT. Yeah. Then perhaps you could tell us about the CFT bit.
Yeah, so compassion-focused therapy is aligned with CBT, but what it's really looking at, and kind of, I guess, why the man who developed it, Professor Paul Dilbert, is based in Derby. What he was recognizing, he was using CBT with his clients and recognizing for some people it just wasn't that effective. And he was noticing it was kind of cohort of people who had high levels of shame, high levels of self-criticism, who just were not responding to CBT in a very effective way. And so he started to develop this new therapy. Compassion.
So it's Claire, so can I just ask a question there? So is that you mentioned the word shame?
Yeah.
So that is something you say that CBT wouldn't particularly be as good for, or is that, have I misread that?
No, I would agree with you there. I think that CBT doesn't necessarily directly deal with shame in the way that I think with compassion-focused therapy it's got it at its core, And really Paul is saying that compassion is the antidote to shame. So
nice.
When we're talking about a fear of flying, the main emotions that are coming up is anxiety and fear. And that's probably the ones that people kind of relate to most, think about most when we're working with any sort of phobia. Yeah. But I think what's really interesting to think about is like, what other maybe secondary emotions are there, or what might be around this fear as well? And I think things that can come in there are definitely shame. So someone's got this fear of flying, and they then might say to themselves, I'm weak, I'm a burden, I'm letting my family down, I'm letting my employers down. And that creates kind of this layer of shame, kind of self-attacking, as well as the actual phobia itself. So it's kind of something else that's come on top of it, which might lead to someone kind of feeling a lack of confidence about themselves, maybe seeing the fear of flying as more global about themselves, maybe seeing themselves as a failure because of it. And so it sort of adds another layer of complexity. I'm not saying that's sort of what everyone's experience might be, but you can see how that could build up for people. I don't know whether, that's something that you've...
Yeah. I was just waiting because this is really interesting stuff. Yeah. I think you're absolutely on the money here, because one of the things that people do with the fear of flying is not everyone, but you do hear certain language patterns about they really beat themselves up. Yeah. All that stuff about letting others down, don't want to show themselves up, won't fly because they're worried they'll have a panic attack and then they'll feel stupid in front of other people, and so just so much around that. I think this is a really interesting area, so I think we'll dwell on this a bit. So tell us some more about this, because it's good.
I mean, maybe it's helpful for me to share something personal here. So, I mean, I haven't worked with the fear of flying before, and I don't have a fear of flying myself, but my mum does, and she's not flown for over 40 years.
Right.
And I think it was something in our family where we just didn't talk about it. It just sort of was a kind of bit of a sort of secret, just not really, we didn't go there. And I think there was a lot of shame surrounding it for my mum. And I think there probably were a lot of critical thoughts there about herself and the impact that it was having on the rest of the family. And I think then that means this person's kind of carrying this weight. And what I think is really helpful is just how do we help this person to maybe talk about it, to take a bit of the shame away from it, and to bring in this compassion. And Paul talks of compassion, kind of there being 3 flows of compassion, so that we can offer compassion to ourselves, building up that muscle, which is often hard to do, often can be critical on ourselves. Being able to give compassion to other people. So maybe with the fear of flying, I might be thinking, can family members show compassion? Can employers who might be needing their employee to fly, can they show compassion? And also for the person themselves, the third flow of compassion is receiving compassion from other people. So are they able to let others kind of support them and let that compassion in as a way of, I guess, reducing some of the stress about the difficulty, making it more acceptable, more normalized in some way. Taking that shame layer away from it. Yeah.
Oh, really? I love this. This is great. So how, with my practical head on that, how might that work then? So we're in a session, and you're picking up some words around that I'm blaming myself, I'm being a bit hard on myself, and maybe it's affecting me, like my general self-esteem and stuff. How would you work with somebody? What would they do? What do you do?
Good question. Yeah.
Is it not?
I might start by borrowing something from CBT, which is sort of a little bit of thought challenging, where I might just say, look, if your best friend was feeling this way, had saying these things about themselves, about their fear of flying, what would you be saying to them? Would you think that they were weak? Would you think that they were a burden? And quite often, if they can sort of stand a little bit apart from their problem and view it from another perspective, they might say, no, not at all. I'd want to support them. I wouldn't think that they were a burden at all. I just want to let them know I was there for them. I want to help them. Might start with that, and then it might just be about, there's a lot of exercises you can do in compassion focused therapy, which help you to build up kind of a compassionate other. So sort of ideal compassionate other in your mind, where you can bring this person to mind to be able to give you kind of either the emotional response that you need, the kind of words of wisdom that you need to hear, or words of compassion. And it would be maybe about, can you practice trying that out in session, building up this person? It may be someone you know, it may be someone famous, it may be a kind of amalgamation of people. People choose like people from film or cartoon characters.
Interesting. So I could go, my compassion, I want Hugh Grant, so I can literally go wild and have who I want.
Yeah.
I like this.
You can have whoever. Yeah, absolutely. They can look whatever you like, and you can kind of bolster them up. How do you want them to feel? What do you want them to do? I'd really like them to just put their arms around me and say, it's going to be okay. This is, I'm here to support you. It's whatever you need to kind of, it's sort of bring on the soothing system. So this is another part of compassion-focused therapy. Excuse me. That the idea that we have 3 emotional regulation systems. So we've got our drive system, which is something that motivates us towards our achievements, our resources. We've got our threat system, which is there to try and keep us safe, take us away from any danger. And we've got our soothing system, which is there to help us to calm down, help us to feel more connected, help us to relax. But often when people are experiencing a fear or a phobia, the threat system is kind of on overdrive, it's overdeveloped. So we see that kind of being really, really big, dominating the system, dominating the thoughts, dominating the emotional sort of system. And we see the soothing regulatory system as much, much smaller. Yeah. And so compassion is there to try and increase the soothing system, which acts as a way to sort of dampen down the kind of high threat system.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So you're trying to get people. To me, my like lack of awareness of the system. Yeah. It's almost like to forgive themselves a bit.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. Yeah, I really like that. It's kind of to see. Yeah, okay, I've got this difficulty with flying, but that's just what it is. It doesn't have to be a bigger kind of message about myself or who I am, and it's not something that I need to hide away or sort of keep in a box somewhere. Like, can I have some acceptance of this is what I'm struggling with at the moment, and can I give myself some compassion for that? It doesn't mean I have to do anything about it now. I don't have to change anything. I don't suddenly have to go and get on a program to overcome this fear. But can I just acknowledge this is here at the moment? It is a struggle for me. It's not everything about who I am. And I think if someone can get into that position about it, it maybe lends itself to being able to talk about it a little bit more, maybe be open with others. And maybe that does in time align with, okay, maybe I feel more in a space to be able to do something about this now.
Well, I was wondering how, because it's a sense of being kinder to yourself.
Yeah.
Like talking to yourself like you would a friend in need.
Yeah.
Sort of. I was wondering how that helps to like get past, how removing it or, being kinder or more compassionate towards yourself helps them with the whole process of and the fear of flying generally,
Yeah. Well, I think if we think we've got the anxiety and the fear of flying, and then we're saying for a lot of people there might be this extra layer around it, the shame and self-criticism. And I think that acts as a further barrier. It makes it like a double threat, So if we can start to kind of take that away, that the shame, add the compassion, it gets someone into a place, I think, where they may be more open to approach therapy, may be more open to change, and may be more open to be able to support themselves on the journey of therapy. If therapy is not easy, it can be a tough ride at times. It does take, some motivation, some resilience, but knowing that you've got a support system there within yourself to be able to take you through that, I think that could help. And it might then, when someone does actually face their fear, help them in the moment when they're feeling anxious. I knew I was going to be feeling anxious about this. It's going to be okay. Maybe bringing in that compassionate other figure. What do I need from them at that moment? And what can they offer to me? And all we're doing there is just really trying to kind of bring on the soothing system in the body, bring on the feelings of kind of more relaxation, dampen the anxiety, but I think that person feels more bolstered in themselves, that they've got their own support system.
So I get this sort of idea that it's like the shame acts is almost like a membrane or a shield around even dealing with the stuff that's inside, like it's another thing to get through, gets in the way.
Yeah.
Is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's it's not going to be for everybody that they're experiencing that, but I think it's, as you say, I quite like this idea of a membrane sort of around it. It can be another barrier to even seeking any support. And like I said, I could see that with my mum and how things were playing out in our family. We kind of put it to one side. We didn't really talk about it. And I think she probably did feel bad that it did impact upon holidays. And now I think back, I think I really wish we, would have been able to talk about that a little bit more as a family, and kind of make it like less of a taboo, let's say.
Yeah. No, this is really interesting, because I think there's a really strong place for this in this group, but also I do hear those triggers time and time again. Like I've really let myself down again, or they'll have a good flight, whatever that means, and then they'll have a bad flight, and they're saying, I thought I'd done so well, now I'm beating myself. I've literally gone back to zero, and think, crikey, so that self sort of flagellation thing is massive.
Yeah. So maybe at that point, trying to draw out, actually, what have I done well on that flight? Actually, just being able to get on, being able to kind of bring in that compassionate side, because that's all what you're talking about there. It's just self-criticism, isn't it? It's really kind of beating yourself up, the kind of post-analysis, and it all becomes kind of very negative about yourself. How do we help to support you in that moment, to be kinder to yourself, to recognize that this is something difficult that you're going through, and bring up that kind of support system.
Because I suppose one of the things that sometimes people find that helps them, and I don't quite know how this differs to the compassion focused approach, but there have been people who've just said, you know what, I've just got to a point. I just thought enough's enough, and I gave myself a damn good talking to, and I got on the graph and just said, "That's it."
Yeah.
Where's that come from? Is that like an opposite thing, or is that sort of something? Similar?
Yeah. So some people might respond to that quite well. Kind of. I mean, always thinking about this from a CFT perspective, I might see that as the drive system kicking in. Right. Okay. That my goal is, I want to get on this plane. I'm just going to go for it. And in that moment, the kind of drive system is overriding the threat system. And that's what's taken its course. So yeah, I can see how that might also work for people. I think with anyone struggling with the kind of the shame aspect, I can imagine, and we run compassion focused therapy groups in our service, and because shame is such an individual thing, isn't it? And we want to try and hide away when we're feeling ashamed. Yes. When you bring people together and you can get them actually to talk about their shame or to talk about their difficulties, you start to see the shame kind of melt away. And I could imagine that might happen in a kind of group program with fear planning, where people start to realize, I'm not the only one, or hearing that someone else is kind of experiencing similar difficulties. And also this part of, they're not judging the other person. They're not thinking badly of the other person, or thinking the other person is weak or bad. And so then it starts to maybe shift the way in which they feel about themselves.
Oh, that's really nice. Because I have heard people say that type of thing, that just coming with our group at the time of recording, we're just on the 6,000 mark of the Facebook group. And people have said, we have lurkers in the group, and sometimes they come forward and they say, just reading other people's stories, or people sort of sharing what's going on, and then realizing they're not alone, they're not weird, and all the rest of it be helpful itself. So I can see that in a group setting where you'd have people could talk about it, and then like it starts to dissipate. I can imagine, we'll see why that would be helpful.
Absolutely. Actually, I end up feeling I have to do much less as a facilitator. It's all just happening in front of me. People
Excellent.
Are and supportive.
That's a good day, isn't
it? And that's kind of like the best thing for shame, when people can share experiences and the judgment just starts to go. So yeah, I think that's a nice example on the Facebook group, people sharing and opening up, and others sort of feeling that they're not alone.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask the same question then. So if someone wants to go for compassion focused therapy and they think, oh, fancy it, I like the sound of that, and how do I find it? How many sessions should I expect? And I mean, I don't think it's as simple as that. I'm probably finding it is simple, but in terms of how long it might take to chip away at things.
Yeah. So check out compassionatemind.co.uk. So that's the website that Professor Paul Dilbert has set up, the founder of CFT. Lots of resources on there, lots of links to books as well. Brilliant. I mean, what I would say, I don't think that CFT is the therapy for directly working on the phobia. Okay. So I would do a CFT in conjunction with something like CBT.
Understood.
Yeah. But I think it's got so many nice elements that would really help with working with the phobia, especially if you're someone listening to this thinking, yeah, the shame aspect, the self-criticism is a really big part of my phobia, then I would look at the CFT work perhaps first. And you find now that a lot of cognitive behavioral therapists would have done training in CFT as well. So maybe someone who's, trained in both could be a really nice kind of match for you. And then, a kind of evidence-based therapy for phobias like CBT works on the avoidance, would then get you when you feel ready. And I think that's really important as well, because maybe friends and family members are saying to you, like, there's this program you can do, like, come on, let's go. But are you ready? That's also key. And I think that compassion brings that in, like thinking about where you are, the acceptance, and when you feel ready to kind of make any changes.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. I mean, this sort of, when I was doing some research around coaching, there was a thing called readiness, which was, I imagine, is a thing for anybody doing sort of self-development, self-help. And you saw, it's like the readiness to work, and that's trying to work out, because, it's like when you go exercise, isn't it? You think sometimes you can go for the best PTI in the world, but if you can't be asked to do stuff in between, nothing's going to change, is there? So that sort of, I'm prepared to put some skin in the game. I want to do the work, and I like the fact that the compassion focus gives you're giving yourself permission not to go at a speed that other people want. You're going at your own speed,
taking that pressure off. I know when I've got someone in therapy who is there because a doctor, a family member, a friend has said they have to go or they should go, and they're under duress. They're often not at a stage where they are ready to do the work. And that'll be my first question: do you want to be here? Is this the right time for you, regardless of what anyone else might be saying? And of course, people might be saying it because, through love and care and support and help for the other person. But where is someone in their journey? And I think that's important before anyone might get started. Because you want to set them up for, success. Phobia, that, fear of flying is something that, you can make a lot of change with. But it's got to feel like, it's the right time, and that you have the capacity to be able to kind of dedicate time to the sessions and the art of session work as well.
I like that, because I'm going to ask you about EMDR in a sec, but I just wanted to ask a question from a sort of semi-technical standpoint. Like, what do you see as the difference between sort of like a fear, anxiety, phobia? I mean, I know there are classic definitions, maybe you just use those, but with your experience, how do you help somebody? Because, the reason I ask is some people will say, I've got the worst phobia ever, like it's competition. And I'm always a bit like, well, as far as actually know,
Yeah. I think when I think about a phobia, I'm really thinking about how much someone is avoiding whatever they're fearful of, whether it's specific objects, situation, or like the fear of flying, how far away is it from them? So for some people, they can't even hear words that relate to the phobia without even being, on a plane or close to a plane. Whereas you might have other people who say, oh, well, I am an anxious flyer, so I will notice that my anxiety increases when I'm flying. I don't particularly like it, but I don't avoid it. And I think that's where we sort of see the scale. So I would almost see it as my mind. I'm not saying that you might not have high anxiety, but you might get high anxiety to fear. A phobia, there's probably going to be high levels of avoidance. And then I'd also be thinking with phobia, what is the impact on day-to-day life? How much is someone having to kind of reorganize their life in order to manage this phobia as well?
That's good. I like that. And why do we get them as humans? We seem like pretty bright. You don't see dogs. Well, you do get dogs get anxious, but I don't know if they get phobias or I don't know. What are they about humans?
Yeah, I don't know whether other animals get phobias. Good question, Mike.
You don't know with other animals. That's fine. It's all right.
But so I guess there could have been what we might think of as like a traumatic experience that someone has had in relation to their phobia, which has then really changed how they're thinking and feeling about that phobia. And that's where it's developing, and then it gets compounded by the level of avoidance. So the more that you think, the more that you avoid, the more it feeds into a belief that something terrible would happen if I was in contact with that phobia. And that's why, or I think it can also link, has there been a bad experience, like, for example, a panic attack in relation to being in contact with phobia before? And yeah, associations can build up over time. Or have I witnessed or heard about someone else have a bad experience, and then that's been my memory. So just thinking about my own personal experience there, my parents really wanted to ensure that I didn't develop a phobia of flying. And so, they made sure that my dad took me on a flight kind of when I was younger. And maybe that was one of the reasons for kind of not talking about it so much, and that they sort of didn't want me to kind of overhear kind of any bad stories or anything like that. But yeah, so that's always what I would want to check out in any kind of assessment that I did with someone. What's their kind of earlier experiences, and what are the meanings that they may have made from that?
But I think that's really interesting, because we get people who the fear has been triggered by the media, and so they've heard something they're not even there. And that's been enough to so that is a relevant thing.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be about direct experience of being on a flight with bad turbulence, or being on a flight and having a panic attack. It may be I have read something. Maybe I've created quite a vivid image of that in my mind, and that's enough to kind of trigger our fear system. And then there's been that level of avoidance. And so we're always looking at, like, what are the maintaining factors that someone might be doing.
So why, I'll ask a question, what's your theory on why humans have panic attacks?
Well, I think it's kind of this, if we're going back to those sort of systems that I mentioned, the threat system, the drive, and the soothing system, it's like it is the threat system in overdrive. So the adrenaline is being released at a really high level. You're getting all the physiological changes in the body, the heart beating fast, breathing faster, feeling kind of nervous in the stomach, feeling shaky. And with panic attacks, someone is then interpreting maybe those symptoms as a sign of something else. So my heart beating really fast, this is a sign I'm going to have a heart attack. My breathing, breathing deeply, maybe I'm going to suffocate, I'm not going to be able to catch my breath. Or they might interpret the physiological change in their body. This is a sign that something really bad is going to happen. Okay. So if I'm having a panic attack on a flight, this is a sign actually something's about serious is going to go wrong with this flight. And then if the avoidance happens after that, I avoid the place where I've had the panic attack, then we get the cycle continuing. But it's coming from that kind of high level of stress and threat perceived. And that's why all the kind of soothing work, the compassion work, relaxation work, really helpful for just trying to help dampen down that threat system.
Okay. This is really good stuff, by the way, Claire. There's been some great moments. So can we have a look at sort of EMDR? So how that might be relevant to people with their fear of flying?
Yeah. So at the moment, EMDR is currently recommended by NICE guidelines. So that's kind of in the UK, the body that reviews all of the therapies and all of the research to kind of say like what works, what doesn't work. So at the moment, EMDR is currently recommended for post-traumatic stress disorder. So essentially someone who's developed PTSD after a traumatic experience. But EMDR could come in helpful if someone feels that actually they've had a traumatic experience, maybe on flight in relation to taking a flight, and that is what is kind of maybe keeps playing in their mind. Maybe they're getting flashbacks to that, and maybe they're getting nightmares to that, and that's playing a key part in their avoidance and their fear. That actually by trying to process that trauma memory may actually need to be the starting point before anyone starts to think about kind of returning flying again and kind of facing the fear. And well, if it sort of the fear of flying came from a traumatic event, the idea would be if you process the trauma memory, actually facing the kind of the fear will feel a lot easier after that. There may not actually have to be that much work that has to be done as long as the trauma memory is present.
How does that work then? Because that's a bit woo-woo.
Yeah. Essentially, it looks at going back into the trauma memory. So getting you to bring that to mind and the particular things that we do to try and process and work through the memory so that you start to maybe think about it differently. Maybe we're essentially trying to take out the emotional heat from that memory and maybe change any thinking that might have been sort of stuck with that memory as well. So sometimes people can say, I truly believed in that moment I was going to die. Yeah, here they are. They're alive. They're well. And so we need to maybe go back into that memory and things might help come out like, okay, actually I survived. And we're taking away a bit of the heat that the memory then isn't coming back to them in the same way. It's not coming back in the form of like flashbacks or images or nightmares. It starts to feel a bit more processed like a normal memory. And that could, make it easier then to face their fear.
So it sounds like it needs quite a skilled intervention so that you're experiencing it in the right way rather than just re-traumatizing yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Again, for any of this work, you want to be ensuring that you've kind of got a skilled, trained therapist. Yeah, absolutely. And that you're in safe hands and that you feel comfortable in the room. A therapist's always going to try. They're wanting to encourage you to move forward, but they're going to tailor it to be at your pace as well.
So if somebody wants to find a trustworthy EMDR human, where might they go?
That is a good question, and I'm going to tell you right now.
Oh, see.
You can
pause the Google.
So probably the best place to go to would be emdrassociation.org.uk. And that's certainly in the UK. You can find out more about EMDR and get a list of therapists there as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's useful, helpful, really helpful. So, there's been some great stuff in this.
Yeah.
So if it's sort of like, let's bring it back to next steps for somebody, or some top tips or something. So somebody's got a fear of flying, they come and see you, and what kind of things? How would you sort of work out what they need? Because because you've got the 3 strands, haven't you? Maybe more, but there's 3 that you've talked about today. So how do you sort of work out, oh, okay, this person needs that?
Yeah.
Maybe it's more intuitive. I don't know.
I always sort of would do, an assessment of their difficulties. So I'd want to be looking there like, when did it start? What did they notice? How severe they think it is, how much the impact. We'd be looking there at the level of avoidance. What comes up for them? What are they thinking? What are they doing? How are they feeling emotionally? And then I'm always developing like a formulation of their difficulties. And that's in collaboration with the person so that we have an understanding of the problem, maybe how it developed, if we can get a sense of that and how it's being maintained at the moment. And then from there, coming up with a plan of how we're going to move forward. Like I said, if I thought someone was experiencing quite a lot of shame and self-criticism around this, I think CFT would be a really nice starting point. Let's work with that first, and then maybe think about a therapy, sort of an exposure-based therapy for the phobia. But, I think any therapist, I hope, is working in, collaboration with their client, talking about the options available, guided by the evidence as well, so that we're offering something that we know has a good basis in research that it works. But I think you want to have that just like an idiosyncratic formulation. Whilst yes, a number of people might be experiencing a fear of flying, then it might present itself slightly differently. So ensuring a really good understanding of what's going on with that person.
That's really good. So I've got a question for you. So it's a belief I have. I'm going to see where you are with this. So I've never had a fear of flying.
Okay.
But I've seen thousands of people who've got past it. And it's led me to conclude, because it's not something you're born with, that anybody could get over it as long as they're motivated and have the right resources. What's your view on that? Am I talking tosh, or is that, would you, why didn't you retire right now?
I absolutely agree with you. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a fake.
This is something that you can work upon and overcome 100%. And, but I think you're right. I think it will require levels of motivation. It will require maybe being with a good therapist, someone who you trust as well. And it may take different times for different people, but I do believe that everybody has the possibility to overcome their fear of flying and overcome any phobia. And there's a lot of good research to show that does happen. And it sounds like in your experience as well, a lot of people who have overcome it too.
Yeah, I think most of the time it was like these large group courses,
right?
Which I'd now say are like, could be fairly flooding for people, because you're literally in a room full of 150 people, and you've got, you've literally you're going to get a flight that day.
Yeah. Okay.
And so they must have done a lot of work themselves before they turn up.
Yeah.
Or they've just reached that point where they've kind of go, I just need that last little bit, because the work we do now with Lovefly is much more personalised.
Okay.
But I don't quite know how they do it half the time.
Yeah.
Magic.
And I wonder whether there's probably a lot of compassion coming in, maybe compassion between the group members who are attending that course, but compassion from the group facilitators as well to support someone to do that.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we try to stay out of judgment, because it's just like, we all do weird stuff.
Yeah.
If someone else was looking at it, it would be so easy to point, why are you doing that? I recognise the odd weird thing I do and think, crikey.
Yeah.
But so we all we sort of like habit forming, pattern making machines. So I just think I'm really reassured by your approach and your expertise, that people listening to this will know that they're not stuck with this. They can definitely do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like that idea of kind of having a non-judgmental attitude about it, developing just some acceptance that this is something that I'm struggling with at the moment. That's okay. Just acknowledging that. Yeah.
Mayor Gibson, fantastic. There's some great stuff there. Some really, I think you took us through it really, very elegantly. You know, it was like there was enough information for us to get it, but I didn't feel like we went off into sort of like job talk or anything. It was really, I think you put that across in a way that I'd be surprised anybody couldn't follow that and then think, oh, okay, that talks to me, you know. So are you still seeing people privately? Do you want to recommend? Do you want to keep your contact details out? Or do you want to stay? You know, don't contact.
No, I don't do any private work, so I am just with the NHS. But yeah, and I think, you know, maybe that's something to let the listeners know, that like whilst we're recommending websites which are for private therapy, absolutely go and speak to your GP as a starting point. They will be able to refer you into psychological therapy within the NHS, which is of course free and confidential. So for anyone's thinking, I can't pay prices of the private therapy, absolutely. Another option is NHS as well.
Yeah, I believe the IESO service is still tapping.
Yeah,
tapping.
Still going. The typing one. Yeah, that's still going.
Yeah, so you know, in the UK, I think it's in other places as well, but I don't know where. I can't speak. I think it might be in the US too. Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. I'm glad you thought it was helpful.
Yeah, no, there's some really lovely, really nice bits there. I think anybody struggling is going to find that very reassuring.
Well, listen, it's really nice to meet you.
Thank you. And you. Yeah. I'm just going to stop the recording there.
Okay, yeah.